Money isn't the thing. It's our belief. It's our mindset. It's how we think. It's our attitude. It's how we think about money that drives our behavior. And we can't operate at a level above our own money mindsets. Sometimes it's a cash flow is a practical matter and there's some things that you should be doing, but maybe it's more about the fact that you feel like, oh shit, I got 100 in the bank. Maybe I'll just buy a car.
Welcome back to the Business of Influence. I'm your host, Daniel Breez. Today's conversation goes deeper than business tactics. It touches real life. My guest is John Nieuwenburg, founder of W5 Coaching. He's helped hundreds of business owners get unstuck by tackling the three toughest challenges they face: time, team, and money. But before becoming a business coach, John was the president of BC Liquor Stores, a role where he managed one of the largest retail operations in the country. Then he made a bold transition from leading an aircraft carrier to helping small business owners captain their own 50-foot boats. John's story includes a TEDx talk on mental health that's as powerful as it is vulnerable, and his coaching style is built on systems, straight talk, and a deep belief in execution over excuses. If you're ready to get your time back, grow your team, and build a business that actually works, this one's for you. John, welcome to the Business of Influence.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
It's an honor to have you. Before you started your coaching career, my understanding is that your last job was running a BC liquor store, or a number of BC liquor stores, which is a massive operation. I wanted to hear a little bit about how you made the transition from working in a job like that to starting to work with small businesses, which I feel like is a very different game.
Yeah, it is. So I was president of the BC Liquor Stores for much of the early 80s. And for those of you in Ontario, just think of the LCBO. It was the BC equivalent of the LCBO. And I wanted to make a career change. And so I started doing retail consulting. I'd been in retail for 25 years. Before that, I was involved in menswear. And the thing I liked about retail consulting is I understood that world and I could add real value, but the difficulty with it was I'd get one or two clients and the project had come to its natural conclusion after 3 or 6 months. And then I'd feel like my nose was hitting up against the wall because I put all my effort and time and attention into this project that I'd wake up one day and I didn't have a client, right? Oh my gosh, what happened? And so I stumbled into the coaching model and then discovered, oh gosh, I could have any number of clients, so 20 or 25 clients. And even if I lost 20% of them in a month, it'd be tragic, but it wouldn't be catastrophic. And so the business model was much more appealing to me than the model of being a consultant where you have key customer risk or too much reliance on a single customer. It was a big transition. Back to your question, I went from focusing on big vision, strategic kinds of things to, the day-to-day kinds of problems and it was a big shift. It took me a while. I sometimes use this metaphor to explain in a way of what you're asking me. It's let's imagine you're the captain of a boat in the Navy, and the boat's 50 feet and the crew is 10, and you're the most qualified engine room guy. How often is that captain spending time in the engine room with tools? A lot. He's the guy. So now let's make you a captain of a 150-foot boat and the crew is 50. How often is that captain in the engine room with tools? Better be never, unless it's a fire or some kind of emergency, because now he's got to. So now let's make you a captain of the aircraft carrier, and there's 2,000 people on board. How often is that captain in the engine room at all? Well, maybe to give someone a 20-year certificate, because now that captain's got a guy who manages the guy who's the engine room guy. So what I did is I went from being the captain of an aircraft carrier to being the captain of a 50-foot boat. And that sort of captures the idea of the transition that was involved.
Do you think that having the experience in the corporate world and understanding things at a higher level, like at that level, you're not really focused on the day-to-day, you're probably focused on key metrics and managing those things. So I bet that it positioned you in a specific way or in a unique way to serve small businesses because they probably weren't used to those types of metrics or that type of management style. Would you say that's
They
accurate?
are. But what's great about retail is when you're a retail operator, even if you're a manager of a single store, as I was in my menswear days, I was very much given the context of an entrepreneurial mindset. We were given a P&L We were given control over certain spending categories. It was entirely up to us. And so I had that mindset. And really, a retail company is a collection, in the case of the BC liquor stores, of 200 locations that all operate under one umbrella, but each one of them operates as a kind of a standalone entity, especially when you're thinking about liquor stores in remote communities and they're the only liquor store in the area, right? They're the only business in the area. Well, that manager operates very much with the owner's kind of mindset. So I had the blessing of both being the captain of the aircraft carrier and yet having spent a lot of time as the not really true, what do they call them? Entrepreneurials, where you have an entrepreneurial mindset, but you're working under the umbrella of a larger corporation. And so I saw both sides of the street.
Hmm. That's actually very similar to my own experience. I was working in public accounting for a really long time, and then I switched over to industry, and I started working at the skincare company. And it was a global company, but the subsidiary in Canada was run as a separate operation. When I came there was basically no accounting department. I've had this entrepreneurial spirit, and I became the entrepreneur, and it was a big factor in why I decided to start a business in general. I find that the
Yeah,
people that can fit those seats often have the right skills to start their own business as well.
exactly. Yeah. Well, good for you. Then we've had a shared experience there.
Yeah, for sure. You spoke at a TEDx talk, which I watched and found to be one of the most courageous things that I think I've ever seen. So just wanted to say that first. I'm curious about how people reacted to you sharing such a raw and vulnerable story and how that may have changed the way that you worked with your clients.
Well, thanks for that. So the context of your point here is in 2011, I attempted suicide. Difficult set of circumstances. I was in deep depression at the time, and in 2015, I did a TEDx talk about that experience and advocated for a change, some education, a change of perspective, and some rethinking about how we think about suicide. I was mission driven. I'm hardwired to be a teacher, and I felt like I had something to share with people and wanted to share and sort of damn the torpedoes. I was going to make my case. And I did get a lot of advice that was be hazardous to my career. You know, gosh, you're supposed to be this big successful guy, and what are you talking about? This kind of difficulty in your life, but I was going to do it anyway. I was like mission driven to do it, and when I found out after the fact is that vulnerability is a very difficult thing to not very many people are prepared to be vulnerable, and yet vulnerability is very attractive to people, or because all of us have felt vulnerability, but we don't often express it. And so what I found out is that often people come to me and meet me as prospects, not despite the video, but because of the video, because they appreciated the story and what you talked about, getting a sense of the real guy and that the real guy had challenges like a lot of us do and figured out a way to work his way through it. So it's turned out to be a blessing for me, although that's not what I expected.
Yeah.
There's a woman named Brené Brown who talks about vulnerability and the attractiveness of vulnerability. And she did a TEDx talk that I think now has 70 million views. So I learned the lesson that Brené Brown talks about.
Incredible. Mental health, I think, is something that a lot of business owners probably struggle with because business can be an emotional roller coaster. So I imagine that you becoming vulnerable allowed your own clients to even become more vulnerable with you.
So here's the thing, business, many clients or prospects think business coaching is really about business system skills and strategy. But the truth of it is that all business coaching is personal coaching in disguise. And so much of, let me reframe it this way, success in life is a product of 3 A's. So A number one is, do you have acumen? Do you have the right set of skills? Number two is activity. Are you doing enough of the right things? And number three is attitude, or let me call it mindset. So often the business owner's activity, they're doing lots of good things. Acumen, they don't always have all of the skills they need. And the thing that holds them back is mindset, because it's a shift in perception, shift in leadership, communication, delegation, all the things that get in the way of us making the transition that holds us back. And so some business owners listening to this would think, oh man, this is oofy poofy, and I don't know if this is for me. So the truth of it is, you may think you have a cash flow problem, but you probably have a mindset problem that underpins the reasons why you have a cash flow problem. I'll tease you a little bit. What's the first few words that come to mind for you when I say the word money?
Accounting, profit, and maybe taxes.
All right, so let me ask you and kind of amplify this point. You have very much an accounting perspective of the word money,
Yeah.
as you would. But what is money? If we went to the dictionary, how would the dictionary define the word?
Method of exchange, I would imagine.
Yeah, so that's the practical application. But the truth of it is, money is an abstract concept backed by confidence. Money isn't anything. It gets represented by currency. What we hold to be true about money is an internal set of beliefs that we hold ourselves to be true and what we hold in society to be true. So let me unpack that a little bit. How does an employee think about money?
They want a paycheck out of them.
Exactly. They trade their time for money. So if you're self-employed, how do you describe money? Well, you make money. It's a different word. You create money. You're not trading time. You're actually making money. So now you're a business owner. How does a business owner think about money? Well, they've got an arm's length entity from which they receive profits, different mindset. Investors think about money as a return on investment. And at the entrepreneur level, the ultimate level of money, Warren Buffett doesn't work for money. Money works for him. So let me unpack that. So, the story of the guy who wins the lottery and 5 years later, that guy is broke.
Broke.
Why? Because the average middle class, what do you do with money? You spend it, you pay bills. So 5 years later, he's broke, but everybody's got a new truck in his neighborhood. If I gave the proceeds of that to Warren Buffett, how would he think about it? What would he be doing with that money? He'd be putting it to work.
Absolutely.
Money isn't the thing. It's our belief. It's our mindset. It's how we think. It's our attitude. It's how we think about money that drives our behavior. And we can't operate at a level above our own money mindsets.
Yeah.
How is this relevant to our conversations? Sometimes a cash flow is a practical matter and there's some things that you should be doing, but maybe it's more about the fact that you feel like, oh shit, I got 100 in the bank. Maybe I'll just buy a car.
Yeah. I'm sure you have stories similar to what I'll just share this. So with my own clients, I see people treat their financials very, very differently. Some people are very much involved with the whole financial process and they want to understand their P&L. Others will often tell themselves the story that they're just not good at this thing. They don't understand financials. And we have to educate them. And sometimes it's harder. But once they become more involved with financials, it does transform their business because they start to understand what's happened, how if they continue to make these decisions, they will continue to see the same results and they become much more results driven. I'm curious, when you start working with business owners, I imagine you said that sometimes they don't have all the right skills that they need.
Yeah.
Would you say that an understanding of financials would be one of those skills? And is that something that you help them understand?
Yeah. My kind of clients are people that start a trades business. So they're general contractors, they're plumbers, electricians. They spend 5 years, getting their ticket to be an electrician, or they're often professional advisors. So they're lawyers, accountants, practitioners. I have a lot of accountants as clients, by the way. They're good at their trade, good at their profession, but they don't know very much about business. They've never had that education. And being a business owner, I'm a business owner. I should know these numbers stuff, but they're kind of embarrassed to actually, I don't really understand it. And I know I should, but I go to my accountant and the small business community, there's a bit of a rant I've got going here, but the small business community is badly served by the accountant community that serves small business, and it's because they have different expectations. So the accountants that serve that industry, they think about their job as tax compliance year end, and that's largely it. And they don't really have an industry or a CFO mindset that's just beyond what they're capable of. They're trained. I can do your taxes. I can make sure you're compliant. And so the business owner on the other side, they get their P&L from the accountant and it goes into a very important drawer in their desk and then they never look at it again because it's so intimidating. It's kind of scary. What does all this mean? And accountants often present the P&L in a way that's compliant for tax reasons, but is not useful for business reasons. If I ask an accountant or a business owner, do you have common size financials? I get a glazed look over, what does that mean? Well, look at just looking at a set of numbers in isolation doesn't have any value. You spent 80,000 on labor this year and 100,000 last year. Which one was the good result? There's no way of knowing without having some context, without knowing what percentage of sales did the 80,000 represent Well, if your sales were $1 million and you spent 80,000 on labor, and last year you spent 500 and you on sales and spent 100 to get it, well, that's a very poor result compared to the result that you got this year. It was 8%. Last year it was what did I say?
I think it was like 25%.
100. Yeah, so it's 20%.
Yeah.
Well, that number gives it context. So, in the example of the 8%, your performance this year was massively better. But the number looks like it's smaller, or looks like it's bigger. The number itself, this is routine stuff for someone who's a CFO or someone with your experience, but lots of business owners don't get this training or don't understand that. Or another thing that lots of owners have struggled with is I'm profitable, but I don't have any money. I got a P&L that said I made a lot of money, but I don't have any money in the bank. How's that possible? How does that work? Well, cash is one thing and profit is entirely a different thing. And those two things aren't always necessarily connected. What is working capital? Well, that might be where the problem is. You're profitable, but your working capital needs are 5 times, 3 times, twice as much as the profit that you have available. Or maybe your receivables are, 50% of them are overdue or 90 days behind, and you got a cash gap problem. Lots of owners don't understand the fundamentals of that don't understand that that's why they need to be paying attention, because delivering your service is one thing, but the ultimate scoreboard is the way numbers work in your business. And I know there's reasons, the work we do is satisfying and it's great to deliver a great product to your customer. But ultimately, hey, let me ask you a different way. We're in Canada. Would you go to a Canucks or a Maple Leafs game if there was no scoreboard?
I'd be counting the score in my head.
Exactly. So if you're operating a business and you don't know what the scoreboard is, you don't know if you're winning or losing. So you got to figure out what the scoreboard means, and all the numbers are on the scoreboard. And often your account isn't going to be the person who can help you with that. It's not that they are malignant or not doing, it's that their expectation, their understanding of what they're meant to be doing is different than what you need. And people like you or business coaches like me help you do that. I can't be your fiduciary. I can't take responsibility, but I can certainly help you understand what the numbers mean and educate you and teach you on how to think about the results you're getting.
When clients start working with you, do they need to then go to their accountant and ask them to change the layout of their financials? Or
oh my gosh, that's a very awkward conversation to have. I'm often on a Zoom call with the accountant and with the business owner, and we're talking about cost of sales. And in a typical way, a P&L is shown, labor is shown as a separate category in the fixed expenses column. And when I say, well, how much of that labor is involved in the delivery of the service? How much is the cost of goods or how much is the cost of sales? Well, half or 3/4 of the labor ought to be above the line, right? Well, what does that mean? Well, we need to be accounting for labor because there's 2 kinds of labor. Labor involved or variable cost labor involved in the delivery of the service, and then there's labor involved in the support of the business. Well, does that mean I got to change the books? Yeah. And what I often, and that's a difficult concept, there's a lot of resistance to that. And what I often say to a business owner is, you ought to have 3 sets of books. They're all legit, by the way. One set is the set that you use for tax reasons. And that set of books is the one that you present to the CRA, and it's optimized for the purposes of tax. And the version you're getting from the accountant is that version. But there needs to be a second version, and that version is the one that's operational, that lets you manage the performance of the business. And that one almost always needs to have a cost of sales. And the labor split into that category in inventory and production costs and that kind of thing. And the third set is where where the boat is and where the college education funds are. And that's your personal set, and nobody else needs to see that. But that's one of the values. I had a client who sold a business, and he had a very specific race car that you would only use on the racetrack. And that business owned that car, and he sold the business. Exactly. I'm being very vague about some of the details here, but that's the third set of books.
It was an investment. It was an asset.
Exactly. Yeah.
That appreciated. Nice. All right. You said you were talking about common size financials, if I'm not screwing up the terminology that you use.
Yeah, common size financials.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you help people? What is it, and how do you help people understand it?
What it is you need a column that shows your the sales column, the cost of sales, and the gross profit, and all the expenses, and the net profit. So that column's all the numbers. And next to that column, you got another column that's all expressed as percentages. So what's your common denominator, common size? Well, everything gets expressed as a function of sales. What does that mean? Well, what's your cost of sales? Well, it was 40%. What does that mean? 40% of the revenue you took in, you needed to use to deliver the service, cost of sales. 60%, that was available for you to spend on your fixed expenses, rent and other things like that. And whatever was left after that is your profit. So those two columns are meaningful, but they're not really relevant unless you've got an equivalent comparison. So let's, for example, say the first quarter, we're just finished the March. So the first quarter of this year, the actual sales numbers, the percentage, then last quarter, the equivalent quarter of the previous year, what were the actual dollar amounts and what percentage of sales were those? And what we're doing is we're going to be comparing the percentages rather than the actual dollars. Now the dollars matter, but they don't have any meaning unless you give them context, and the context is common size. Last year, your cost of sales was 42%. This year, it's 40%. Wow, that's a great improvement. It means more, the 2% went to your gross profit, made it possible. Some portion of that went to your net profit. If you don't know what that number is, you can't manage to that number. You can't understand what caused that to happen. What was I doing to create the result that we're describing here? And so that's what the kind of work you do. And that's what I help a business owner start to recognize how they should be looking at. And the meaning, those numbers are very oblique if you don't understand the context or how to interpret that. And again, let me say, don't feel embarrassed or awkward about going to your accountant, because if you ask lots of accountants, they would look at you with a blank stare. They don't really know, or they kind of give you vague answers, and you're left wondering, kind of like that example of that case study. It's, my accountant said everything's great, and yet I was losing money. How could you rationalize those two things? Well, it's because your accountant is not equipped to help you with the things you're looking for.
Yeah, I'd agree. When we first started working with clients, and because I work mainly with coaches and consultants, we had a P&L that we would just replicate for all of our clients. It was like a standard one that we would use. And as I started working with more business owners, I started to understand that even they all see their business in a particular way. So sometimes we would have to have some variation. But of course, what you're saying is crucial. Like, you have to be able to compare how you're doing in an apples to apples comparison.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
And common sizing is the way that you do that.
All right. You've got this, when you talk about what you do, how you help business owners, you talk about three things. So we just talked about the money one, I would imagine. Can you talk about the other ones? What's so special about your business, and how are you able to help people with those three things that you talk about?
So the challenges, the business owners I work with, they're challenged around three things. So time, and you're saying things like, I've got too much to do and not enough time to do it. I can't get everything done. If I don't do it, it won't get done. So you're complaining about that. Team, it's about recruiting. Finding good people is very difficult. Finding people who can do the work at the level you need. And culture, it's hard to get the culture you want. And then money, we've been touching on that. Money's got two components to it. So one part is what we've been talking about, the dashboard, financials, reporting, KPIs, a way to measure. And the other side of money is I want better sales and marketing. I need more money. And so to go back to the heart of your question, what does time look like? How would I help a business owner who's struggling with time? Well, lots of times business owners start and they're doing everything. They're the chief cook and bottle washer, and they grow until they can't do everything anymore. And now they're working 70 hours because that's what they're. And so when they think about taking on a coach, it's like, I don't have time for this. I can't possibly work with a coach. I'm already working more than I want to. And here's the thing I know for sure. You're right. You're working way too hard. So you don't have time, but here's what I know for sure. You're doing 5, 7, 10 hours a week of work you should not be doing. You're not the right person. Now, maybe you were when it was one truck and maybe your spouse was helping you with the books, but now it's 5 trucks. And what that means is you can no longer be the captain of the 50-foot boat. You've got to be the captain. Well, how does that transition look like? Well, one way we'd do it is I'd do it in a sort of systematic way. I'd get you to audit your time. What are you doing with your time through your workday? And lots of owners don't like doing that very much. It's pretty tedious. So I have a hack. And the hack is, what's on your oh shit list? What's your oh shit list? What's the list of things that you when you think about having to do that, you say to yourself, shit, I have to do payroll. Shit, I need to do receivables. Shit, I need to do scheduling. All of those things is when your intuition in your stomach or you're resisting, well, that's your clue. You shouldn't be doing that work anymore. And so let me help you think about it this way. If you're in a trade, you're billing yourself out at, say, $200 an hour or 250 or $300 an hour. That's what your billable time's worth. So why are you doing work that someone will do better than you? And they'll do it for $20 an hour and they'll do it happily. Why are you doing that work? Well, first of all, I don't know how to identify. Well, here's the Ochette list. That's how you identify it. And now I don't know how to delegate. Yeah, it's hard, but let me help you. So everything that we're talking about is something that can convert to an SOP, a standard operating procedure. So what do I mean by that? Let me give you an example. So how do they get the French fries to taste the same in your town or mine? And the French fries are made by a 16-year-old, and the parents of the 16-year-old can't get him or her to clean their bedroom. How do they do that? They have great systems. They have great SOPs. They have a great recipe. Yeah, but I don't make fries. Okay, that's fine. I get it. We're just talking about that as an example, but anything you need someone else to do for you, you're going to walk through that and demonstrate it to them once. In my case, my VA virtual assistant is in the Philippines, and we'd get on a Zoom call and I'd walk through what I'd ask her to do and we'd record it. And the first thing she does is she writes the SOP. I don't write it, she writes it. And why does that matter? Because when she has to write, document, think through, she actually learns the process. She educates herself. Then she sends me the SOP. And when I look at it and agree, it forms kind of a contract. When I say, Noemi, would you onboard my new client? We have a pre-agreed upon systematic way of what that's supposed to look like. Hey, why are the 10 Commandments written in stone? Because we never debate if thou shalt not kill as a commandment. We never debate whether what that means when we say onboard the new client. And the third component of it is that the SOPs are written in such a way, they're so clean and clear. I could give it to any capable party, third party, and they'd be able to do it again without a lot of help from me. So I wouldn't have to recreate how do we make French fries. So what that means is that 5 to 7 to 8 hours worth of work you're doing as a business owner, we'll get someone else to do it. And that'll free you up either to do something more productive, billable time, or you can get your life back. Hey, maybe you can go to one of your kids' hockey games for a change, or, go for a date. Maybe that gets some of your life back. So you have an option, you have a choice. And that's some of the things that a business owner has to do as they think about going from that 50-foot boat to the 150-foot boat. How do you actually make that transition happen? Well, you have to get clear about where do I create value in this business? What are the most valuable things I do? And what are the things that the business needs done, but I'm not the right person to do it anymore?
Yeah. I love the idea of an oh shit list. That is a very key thing.
Everybody can relate to that, and
Oh,
everybody
yeah.
can immediately think of 5, 6, 7 hours. Now, here's the thing. I worked with a woman, Erica's her name, and she had a Fresh in Her Fridge was the name of the company, and she had a service where she would get a customer, and then she would do grocery shopping, and she would go into the customer's home, and she would prepare a week's worth of food for that customer. So the customer would come home, they were professionals, and they'd get home late, and instead of ordering a pizza, they could go into the fridge, and there'd be delicious, nutritious, well-cooked food. And so when I first started working with her, she was probably doing like 100 grand. She was a solopreneur. And over the course of a year, she went to doing over $1 million. And my point here is every 3 months, we had to redefine her job. What's your job now? You can't be the guy or the person going grocery shopping. That you can't be doing that anymore. Well, let's get some more nutritionists. And then after a while, I don't even have time to manage the nutritionist. Well, you got to get a team leader. You got to get someone who's going to manage, hire, recruit, train. Because what are you doing? Well, the most valuable thing Erica could do was go into people's homes and explain the value and why it was worth what the prices she was charging, why it was worth that, and how it created value for that owner. Most nutritionists wouldn't be able to do that. She could. And so she learned over time that she had to focus more on the highest and best use of her time. And as a result, that forced her to have her think about how do I get the other things done in my business, but it can't be done by me. So the hack I have is you got to change the question you ask yourself. It's not how can I get this done? The better question is how can this get done? And the only part of that change is the I part.
I remember when I first started delegating, and it was very difficult to keep track of my priorities and then also all of the priorities that I started to delegate to team members because I hadn't yet delegated the responsibility over the outcome. And so I would have these lists, my own lists of priorities, and then all the things that I'm waiting on somebody to do. And as much as I remember trying to have everything systemized so that I like to say that it was idiot proof, I found over the years that you can systemize things very well and you should systemize things and put them into SOPs, but there is also something to be said about finding the right team members. I imagine that the client that you were just talking about may have had trouble at first letting go of the control. Is that something that you help your clients with? Is that part of the team work that you do?
So you think of it as letting go of control, but that's not actually, if you're delegating properly, you're not letting go of control.
Okay.
You control in a different way. And what that means is you systematize the way that you document expectations, you document KPIs, you document all of the metrics that help you recognize if the work's being done at the level that you want, at the level that you require. So instead of you personally doing it or working side by side, you use the systems and the business to give you a proxy insight into what's happening in any given category. And let me use this example. We were talking about French fries. So getting the business to work in the way that we're describing could be thought of as a three-legged stool. So the first leg of the stool is systems run the business, people run the systems, you lead your people. So if people run the business, as people come and go, your business rises and falls on the back of those people. If systems run your business, then people can be brought in or let go or changed. And the backbone of the business is the system, and you're the one who provides leadership. So that's the first leg. The second leg is about 85% of what happens in a business ought to be routine. This is how we make French fries. We just do it time and time and time again. About 15% of the time, stuff happens. Mistakes happen. Things don't work the way that we want. So in my hypothetical story, one day we were run out of potatoes. My God, what do we do? This has never happened. Well, Danielle, what are we doing? We're run out of potatoes. What do we do? And we figured out a solution. 10 o'clock at night, somebody's phoning you. And the third leg of the stool then is that when something like that occurs, we never look for a people solution. We look for a system solution. So the question we're asking is, what would the system have to be? What would we need to have in place so we would know what to do, in this case, when we run out of potatoes?
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't want to get a phone call at 10 o'clock at night on a Saturday, right? But we didn't see this happening, or this is the first time, so we'll deal with it. But 85-90% of the time, we have a routine on how things are done. Some people, I did a webinar yesterday with a group of people that are woodworkers. They deliver high-end cabinets to homes, million-dollar homes and commercial. And they were like, I don't make French fries. You're right, you don't. But here's the thing. In the case of these people making these kitchens, every kitchen is different. Yes, every kitchen has a unique set of finishes and details and this kind of thing, but the process to deliver that kitchen has to be systematized.
Mm-hmm.
So let me give you an example. Would you let a surgeon, or would you go to a hospital if you knew the operating room didn't have a pre-operating room checklist? We started with 30 scalpels, but we have 29. What happened? Now that surgeon probably took 10 years to get the training to be able to do the skill. So that needs training, and every circumstance might be different, but the way we deliver that service is a process. And we can repeat it. We can do heart surgery time and time and time and time again. And the only thing that changes is the patient on the table and their specific set of circumstances. Or let me put it a different way. Would you get on an airplane if you knew the pilot didn't have a pre-flight checklist? Let's just wing it. Let's just start this thing. Let's see how it goes. No, of course, there's a systematic way that we can time and again robustly know that we're going to get this airplane started and ready for takeoff in a way that 1,000,000 miles is the safest form of transport. How do they do that? They have robust systems, in this case, checklists.
I imagine you have a very clear expectation for what an SOP should look like then when it's done, right?
Yeah, I do. It depends on the level of the business. So, if it's a smallish business, something on a Google Drive doc would be fine. Step 1, step 2, step 3. In a business like, I had a client who owned a occupational therapy business in Ottawa, and they had OTs, or occupational therapists, and like 10 of them in different places in Northern Ontario. And so what they did is they created a Google site. So they created a a website using the Google platform. And if you were out in the field, you could access that site. And if you needed to know how to do billing, you could refer to that. So depending on the size of the business, sophistication of the business, I'm sure, in McDonald's case, they probably have apps on the phone that, that somebody can look at. The principle of SOPs is the same, but how it shows up depends on the needs, the complexity, the size of the business.
Yeah, love it. I'm going to shift gears a little bit. I really wanted to ask you this question. You talk about critical non-essentials. I would love for you to explain what that is. And are there any common critical non-essentials that you recommend that people have in their own business? Yeah, I'll let you explain.
So let me tease you a little bit. How good's your dentist?
I think they're good. I don't like
How do you know?
going.
How do you know they're good? Or let me ask you
I
this
don't.
question. If I took the work, your mouth, to that dentist's professor, what grade would that work get?
Absolutely no idea.
Exactly. So how do you told me your dentist is good. How do you know that?
They make it a slightly more enjoyable experience than my other dentist did.
That's what critical non-essentials are. So what we do as shoppers of professional services, in this case a dentist, is we use proxies. So are the magazines on the coffee table, are they fresh, are they new, or are they 6 months old and tattered? If they're old and tattered, is that some kind of signal about how the work is going to get done? So we take that as a clue. Treated respectfully when I entered. Did somebody greet me? Did somebody offer me a little bottle of water? Did they explain to me what the bill was going to be and how much to expect when? What was the bedside manner of the dentist? I don't know if the work's any good, but I do know how I'm being treated. And so we look for those critical non-essentials. To the view of a dentist, the view of any professional, we think of our work as the quality of the professional work. And that's not, I can't judge if you're a good accountant or not. I don't know. How do I know you're a good lawyer or not? But what I can judge is the way you conduct yourself. And I use that to then, by proxy, decide if you're good or not. And so this dentist that I'm talking about got fed up with being a dentist because he was very, very unhappy. And what he did is he took the signs down in his business and he focused entirely on critical non-essentials. So and one of the lessons he had is he came out of the treatment area of the clinic one time, and this was in Australia, and he put it in a more colorful way, but he had a gay man who was the receptionist, and there were two old ladies in the reception room, and they were chatting it up and having a wonderful time, and the dentist came out and he kind of chided, gave shit to the reception person because, what are you doing? You're just talking to the two little ladies. He's the reason we're here. And that was kind of a biff, oh my God, what the heck? I'm focused on the wrong thing. This guy's actually providing a great experience to my two patients. And I think that he's not operating a pencil or a typewriter. And so he can't be doing anything valuable. He would take and create kind of like a Hollywood star photo of you, and he would put that on the door to the treatment area, and he would, on the back of that was everything relevant to you. What do you want to watch on TV? What shows do you like? What are the names of your kids? What hobbies do you have? What was the treatment? So everything that was relevant to that patient, the dentist could scan, brief themselves, and speak in an informed way about everything. And that was part of the experience of going to the dentist. And in fact, he took the signs down and he started charging double than his normal fees. And there are lots and lots of people that were happy to pay the fee to get the kind of treatment they were getting because they didn't want to be, why do people fly first class? Because it's worth it. And because I can. And this dentist was easily able to charge double because he created value. He created an experience that people were willing, who had the means, of course, but they were willing to pay for it.
Incredible. It's hard to do in a virtual environment because you don't have the ability to let me get you a water bottle. But I think it's still possible to get those critical non-essentials even in a virtual environment. Do you have any tips for people who maybe operate a virtual business on what kinds of critical?
Yeah, so tell me about your Zoom setup. So I'm looking at a teleprompter right now. And behind that teleprompter, so a teleprompter is a way of beaming the signals. Your image is on an iPad that's projected to me. But what I'm able to do is look through, or what the camera perceives is that I'm looking directly at you. And so I have a high quality microphone. Studies have shown that when it comes to the Zoom experience, bad audio is much more stressful for people on the other end. So tell me, what have you done to lift your game? In 2020, suddenly everything changed. And we went, and so what was acceptable before then, now I have a studio in front of me. Wow. Well, it's, to some extent, still, I got 3 lights, high quality Hollywood style lights in front of me to create a positive experience. I'm not using a virtual background because they're kind of awful and you get these artifacts and stuff. And so part of what you can do is make sure the experience, the actual Zoom experience is great. Another thing that I do as part of the onboarding is we send you a subscription to Audible. So I'm a big proponent of learning and reading. So Audible was possible to do virtually. I don't have to drive and bring you a book. I got a list. I got lots of lists of books you should read, and I'm giving you a way to an avenue, a way to act on that. As I sometimes tease, you should go to Windshield University. What's that? Well, the time you spend behind a windshield instead of listening to sports radio, why don't you listen to a great book and get a little smarter about something?
Oh, yeah. Great point. I wanted to, before we wrap up, we have a few minutes left. I wanted to understand what drives you to keep going with this. What you've helped a lot of clients, and I imagine that it's very rewarding for you to keep doing this. What have been some of the more rewarding parts of running this business, and what's driving you to keep going?
Well, I'm 71, so most people assume I'm retired. For a while, I played golf 5 days a week, and then I found out that's really boring. Because after a while, it just feels like you're just doing another lap around the golf course and there's really no satisfaction. So what I've learned is 2 days a week of golf is great and 3 days of work is great. It's great because it's fun working with clients. It's fun seeing the kinds of changes they can make. And that gets crystallized when you get testimonials from people or when they give you case studies. And so I said earlier, I'm hardwired to be a teacher. And so I do this because I'm a teacher and because it's satisfying. I want to share a little bit of, some of the things that I know can help other people be successful. So I'd like to be a bit of a guiding light in that respect.
Amazing. John, thank you so much. Did you have any final thoughts that you wanted to share? Where can people find you?
Well, I'm easy to find. W5coaching.com is my website, or John at W5coaching.com. I'll give you a way to memorize that or remember that mnemonic, memory hook. So what is W5? Well, I said earlier, I rely on a thing called the Socratic method of leadership. So Socrates had it, the best way to help somebody is to help them figure it out for themselves. And the way I'd help you do that is we go through a guided conversation where I'm asking you to explore, what the options are and what the possibilities are and what the trade-offs are. And of course, you do that through questions. And the 5 core questions are who, what, when, where, why. E5.
Nice. Love it.
So if you're wondering, go to W5 Coaching and go to the contact page and reach out if you want. There's lots of great resources there, book lists, resources on ebooks. And, the blogs are written and they're posted in chronological order. So if there's 400 blogs once a week, it's really hard to make any rhyme or reason of it. But if you go to the resources page, you'll find we've organized blogs into what we call the ultimate guides. So the ultimate guides to time management, the ultimate guides to financials, the ultimate guide to being a business owner. And we've then grouped together all the blogs that are relevant to that theme. And so, it's possible to kind of get a university level business owner education if you just went through the ultimate guides.
Yeah, I went through them and I can say that is 100% accurate. You have a wealth of knowledge just on your website. So I highly recommend that people come across your world and reach out to you if they need help.
The thing about it is knowledge is easy to get. Google, ChatGPT, there's no sort of economic value in knowledge. So I'm happy to share the knowledge that I have with you. But the thing that's hard, execution, doing it, implementation. So I don't get paid for knowledge. I'll share that knowledge because I'm happy to share that. And I want you to know that knowledge is available. But the thing that's hard is how do I put this into action? How do I implement that? If you'd like some help with that, that's what a coach does.
John, thank you so much for being here. This was a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be part of it.